Hellboy is a 2004 film co-written and directed by the beautifully bearded Guillermo del Toro. Guillermo, okay, Mr. Del Toro. You almost definitely recognize his work even if you can't pronounce his name. Everything the guy makes, from Pan's Labyrinth to Pacific Rim, is wonderfully stylized, and whether he's building giant prosthetics to create an effect the audience might not even recognize, or tossing out an homage to On the Waterfront in a superhero movie, Del Toro paints larger-than-life stories with the brush of a movie superfan. I really admire the guy, and I think he's probably one of the most talented filmmakers of all time. Directors like Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu praise him for coming through in tight spots.
When I was struggling editing Amores Perros 7 months inside, suddenly, I heard that he generously wanted to help me. And I said, okay. Next day I opened the door and Guillermo is there with his eyes of a boy. And then, honestly, he really, really helped me to shape Amores Perros.
On late night shows, he's always talking about how much he loves his crew and inspirations.
This is very nice. This is a miniature of the Pirates of the Caribbean Captain Bed.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a complete Disney freak. I go to Disneyland 2-3 times a year at least.
And his Twitter is just littered with fan art and panels, most of which have nothing to do with his own work. But before this becomes a Del Toro gushathon, let's get into the reasons why I specifically love his work on Hellboy.
Could you hurry up, because it's a little spooky in here.
The world of superheroes has been getting more and more realistic for a while now, and in a sea of depressed middle-aged men wearing tights, Hellboy stands out as a love letter to being fantastical and weird. The cigar, the cats, the one-liners.
I'm fireproof. You're not.
It's just so much fun, and I can't think of another superhero film that has this kind of otherworldly charm. Honestly, Hellboy resembles Indiana Jones more than any caped crusader. The whole mysticism and wonder behind the everyday thing is really crucial to both characters, and each have this sort of respect for things unseen that's weirdly entertaining. Also, both fight Nazis, deal with daddy issues, and shoot revolvers, so maybe Mike Mignola owes Spielberg some money? I don't know. My point is that it's refreshing to watch a superhero movie with serious themes that doesn't take itself too seriously. Marvel gets at that every now and again, but they always tie it back with some sort of ultra-mondo realistic showdown of doom. DC dives headfirst in the other direction and goes insanely dark with pretty much every film, but Hellboy feels like the stories I grew up on. A quirky demigod just looking to help out and crack a few jokes as he takes on the bad guy. And as much as I love films like The Dark Knight and Logan, sometimes I just want to curl up with a bowl of ice cream and watch a red monkey man shoot a big old gun. And speaking of red monkey men, our titular hero is so deeply complex, it's amazing Del Toro wasn't nominated for more gold statues. Hellboy's arrogant, but behind that arrogance, he's terrified. He's love-struck, but behind that love, he feels inadequate. He's carefree, but behind that nonchalant attitude is an insanely passionate individual. All those contradictions could have created something muddled and uninteresting, but instead Hellboy comes out with this very distinct voice that's not only endearing, but almost tangible. I've known that person. I've been that person. And when the third act hit, I wanted him to triumph because of who he was. Not because his dad got killed or because he loved the Human Torch. I wanted Hellboy to win because he was Hellboy. And that's great writing.
He loves you, you know.
Another reason I love Hellboy is because of its awesome romantic subplot. 1 billion action films have been shot in the foot by incorporating the afterthought of a love interest, but Hellboy works that chaz so deep into the characters that I actually give a crap when everything is said and done. Most movies with romance as their main plot can't get me to care like this one does. And reflecting on this, I think the reason I get so invested in the Liz-Hellboy dynamic is because their story is so unique. First of all, this is not a boy meets girl kind of love story like we're used to. The audience is thrust into an already broken relationship of two people with a lot of baggage. So much so that it forces them apart. Liz becomes distant, and try as he might, Hellboy is just too insecure and immature to respect her boundaries. But by the third act, both the audience and the characters realize how important they are to each other. Despite their flaws and despite the baggage, there's something between Liz and Hellboy that triumphs over all the noise. So they come together and choose to love each other. It's not a fairy tale, but something raw and real and heartwarming. And the line that seals everything up has got the perfect amount of kitsch and sweetness.
I heard your voice.
said, hey, you on the other side. Let her go. Because for her, I'll cross over. And then you'll be sorry.
Ugh. Gets me every time. Let's move on to the Golden Army before I start crying. So the production of the second Hellboy film was a bit of a mess. Revolution Studios, which produced the original, went completely out of business between 2004 and 2006, leaving a partially written film up in the air. Del Toro was already working on the soon-to-be critical darling Pan's Labyrinth, so every day it was looking more and more like Hellboy 2 would fizzle out. But when things looked bleakest, a cherub named Universal Studios descended from the heavens, and they saw the whole situation as an opportunity to grab up a property with name recognition. They bought the sequel, tacked on a 2008 release date, and production rocketed into high gear. All in all, I think the end result turned out pretty well. The effects got bigger, the action is still a feast for the eyes, and once again, there's some really solid snapshots of the human experience within an inhuman universe. There's a lot to love about this movie, but let me give you a few reasons why I think it's great.
I feel glad when you're glad.
I absolutely adore the first 10 minutes of The Golden Army. The howdy doody thing, the caring professor, an ounce of cheese at the end.
Come on, those guys, they can't be real.
Well, my son, I'm sure you'll find out.
It sets up the tone in a great way, and teaches us a lot without feeling like it's teaching us. I mean, we obviously learn the 3 pieces of the Crown plot device, but we also get a sense of who the elves are before we meet them. It makes their actual introductions seem like more of a reveal. It's an, oh shoot, that's the princess moment, rather than a, hello, I'm the new character, please love me kind of thing. I also want to mention how perfect the opening credits are. Right before we're thrown into a modern world, the audience is tossed around this magnificent forgery, where out of the lava we see Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. It gives us a sense of how powerful the antagonists are before we even catch any sight of them. The stylistic switch-up is really cool too, and even though a lot of other movie intros jump into animation to tell some backstory, Hellboy doing it doesn't come off as super tropey. I think it works for me because we've had a full movie establishing how the professor bases his livelihood off these fairy tales, and his earnestness about the danger of the Golden Army breaks through the stereotypical nature of the storybook opening a bit. I could talk about this for 4 or 5 minutes longer, but for time's sake, let's move on.
We're running out of time.
Then we go after the prince.
I freaking love Abe Sapien. It took upwards of 5 hours to get Doug Jones in the makeup, and real talk, that was 5 hours well spent. He was clearly committed to the part, and shines behind all that stuff. I've always thought it was a shame Jones didn't get his voice in the first film. Revolution felt like they needed more name power behind the movie, so they crammed in my dude David Hyde Pierce of Frasier fame to dub in all of Abe's lines. Hiring Pierce backfired on them, though, when he decided to mimic Jones's performance to the best of his ability, and refused to have his name anywhere on the film or promotional campaign. Pierce felt like the character wasn't truly his. And you gotta give Niles self-awareness props for this one, because in the second film where Universal let Jones do the whole thing, it's pretty dang clear that Abe Sapien is all Doug Jones. He had to be so dynamic in this movie. Funny, sad, likable through betrayal, and all the while hitting this odd personality. A sort of intellectual poshness that's confident but not conceited. Jones pulls the whole thing off spectacularly and basically carries half the film. In fact, I'd be willing to say Hellboy 2 is as much Abe's movie as it is Hellboy's. He's integral to every arc, he forces the inciting incident, and while I can see how the whole tree girl thing would be too much cheese for some people, the healthy serving of Abe Sapien cut through all that for me and made for a very real moment. A moment that hit me harder than the Liz is pregnant storyline, if I'm being real honest. To sum it all up, the character is basically a triple threat in this film. Fun to look at, well written, and more engaging than 90% of monsters on screen. This is probably my favorite part of the Golden Army. I love Kung Fu. I love it. And for some stupid reason, you don't see martial arts on American screens like you used to. If fights aren't close-up shake-a-thons, they're insanely realistic, with military-esque Krav Maga or whatever. That's not to say there aren't a few exceptions where we see some beautiful fights, like my boy Donnie Yen in Rogue One, cough cough, best part of the whole movie. But what I'm trying to get at is that we've lost something in the past few years when it comes to our choreography. Fights don't really look beautiful as much as they feel intense. The Prince's choreography is like a painting in the second Hellboy, fluid and violent with the precision of a ballet dancer. It fits the world so well and it looks so dang good. What happened to stuff like this? What happened to the Matrix-y scenes that make your jaw drop and your brain explode in childlike awe? I really hope stuff like this comes back around, and if Yen's performance in Rogue One was any indication, I feel like it will.
It's not about you. He's acting out. Things are a little tense with Liz.
Tense. How tense? Tense how?
Well, you know, the usual. New couple, making adjustments. They argue.
They argue, huh?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Like everybody else. They have good days and bad days.
This is why Hellboy 2 is on this show. Straight up. I love what I said I loved, and I love a lot more about this movie too, but ultimately, more pleases a show about what makes great sequels and reboots. And having reasonable conflict is something that the sequel excels at where most fail. At a first glance, you might think this is something too simple to praise. How hard is conflict, right? That's like the essence of a story. And you're partially right. Having conflict is inherent to storytelling. But having reasonable conflict in a sequel? You're practically asking for the moon. Follow-up films generally seem like you can pull whatever garbage motivation you want out your butthole and people will stop to sniff it. But great sequels have a reason to exist outside of a boardroom.
Loser! Idiot!
Hellboy 2 is a great example of a sequel that spawns naturally out of the original. Our heroes have a giant world to play in, and there are plenty of relational dynamics to explore. For example, what do you do now that the professor is dead? How are Liz and Hellboy doing back together when he's got the emotional maturity of a peanut? Will the prophecy about Hellboy bringing doomsday for the entire human race really be fulfilled or not? Etc. You can find new motivations and issues in every single resolution Hellboy has, and that's what justifies a sequel being made. If more franchises went about following up their origins by expanding upon previously established gaps in their characters and world, we'd be in a much more entertaining cinescape. And I don't think that's a word, but you get what I'm saying. Follow-up films shouldn't happen just because you laid out something new in the last 10 seconds, or because the first film was super charming, or because you can make some fat stacks on the back end. They should happen because you can justify a new kind of conflict for the characters and world. That justification can be found in anything worth its salt. Just look at the natural questions that arise from inherent flaws to the story and expand upon them. Boom! You got yourself some reasonable conflict. It seems simple, but so many movies don't do this. You don't gotta erase all the protagonist's progress and start from ground zero, or toss in an unknown element that doesn't really matter to me all that much. Just capitalize on the natural gaps. Del Toro does that perfectly in this film, and it's really too bad we're never gonna see him do it again in a third installment. Regardless, I definitely want to see him do more of this kind of thing, and I'll watch whatever sequels he's making next. Whether that's Shape of Water, sorta not a sequel, whatever, is a sequel, I don't give a crap, or Pacific Rim 2. I'm gonna watch anything else Del Toro makes, and I want more of it. Throw up the end card.
Okay.
Thanks for watching. If you thought that video was cool, I plan to upload every month on the 22nd, so there'll be more to come. You can also follow me on Twitter at IsaacLastName and get updates about the show, fun facts about the movies I'm watching, and other stuff. So if you're a Twittery person, you can do that. Alright, that's all I got. Thanks for watching, you guys, and bye, y'all.